Hi and welcome everyone. This is Annika. Today I'm going to be talking to Himangana Gupta from India. She's a visiting research fellow at the United Nations University and a specialist in gender and climate change in India and working with local communities. Hi Hima, I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We last spoke about a year ago when I was interviewing you for my master thesis, and when you were in Tokyo, and you provided me with so many and interesting insights about the topic. So I'm so super proud, and it makes me so happy um, to be here today with you. And to not lose any time, let's dive directly into the topic. First of all, I'd like to ask you, where are you right now and where did you grow up?
So, Annika, I'm currently in India, and I was doing my postdoctoral research fellowship in Japan, and I just returned 3 months back to India. I have been working on various issues that include local communities and gender. But my work is more towards engagement of local women, so that they are empowered for taking climate action on the ground. So my own growing up was in a family which has a lot of liberal values, and I never felt that gender equality was an issue until I was at least 25 years old, because my family, they never even talked about such issues. For them, there was no difference between having a daughter and having a son. So that's why I have a kind of a tendency in which I do not think that a female is anyway lesser than a man. But when I grew up, I came to know about several things which included gender equality. And basically, that's how my career started to shape in taking up issues which are related to gender and especially related to climate change.
So you were just mentioning the climate change. How do you experience climate change in India, and how is climate change changing over the years?
The IPCC suggests that there are going to be more changes in climate after we reach the 1.5 degrees C temperature rise. So currently we are at 1.1 degrees C, and we are trying to limit it. So if we fail to mitigate, basically we have to adapt. And if we fail to adapt, we have to suffer from loss and damage. So this is how it flows. So currently we are trying to mitigate it, and we are also trying to adapt so that we don't face more loss and damage. So our focus is not to increase the adaptation gap for us in future, a stitch in time saves nine kind of thing.
And how are especially women, men, and maybe queer people affected differently? Because we know that there are vast differences between the genders, but really how do they show up?
Yes, so women actually, it's known worldwide that women are actually affected disproportionately from the impacts of climate change, and there is no doubt at all on that fact. But there are certain things that actually why it's disproportionate, why the women are suffering more. During extreme events, the women become disadvantaged because of some kind of physical inhibitions and the lack of support. Another thing is that women, they work very closely with nature. And it's the women who go to fetch water. It's the women who go to fetch firewood outside. It's the women who have the responsibility of the households. So if climate change impacts the source of water, if climate change affects the source of firewood for them, or anything, any restrictions, any policy, if it affects the availability of resources, natural resources to them, then it's the women who will have to walk longer distances for that. It's the women who are going to suffer because of the lack of water resources, so which is one of the major impacts of climate change. Another thing that the climate change may impact the women and men differently is the agriculture. In Asia altogether, 70% of the labor force in agriculture is women. But the problem is that they don't have the title to the land they work on. The land belongs to the male, or they're working only as a laborer over there. They will understand what changes the climate is having on that area, on that land, but they may not be able to take the right decisions on time to basically prevent the changes to happen, or basically to adapt to those changes. It's not possible for them. In this case, I would actually like to even refer to one of my videos on the YouTube that actually shows the women in one of the states in India. It's Madhya Pradesh. So in one of the villages, the women, they talk about how much precipitation has gone down, how much problems are occurring, how much the yield losses have happened. They understand agriculture very well because they work on the field directly. But the thing is that they cannot take any decision to protect it. So the fourth issue that I would like to talk about, the disadvantage for the women is the food and nutritional security. So you see, if less food is available, so it's the women will try to feed their men, they'll try to feed their kids first. They would sleep, empty stomach, and so that affects their nutrition, and they're working hard. They have to do a lot of physical labor, so that really affects their health. It affects their their nutrition, so make disadvantaging them in the longer run because of the lack of resources. And another thing is the financial instability. So you may actually think that how financial instability is linked to climate change. It's nothing to do with climate change, but climate change, the kind of impacts that it would have, it would basically disadvantage the women who are financially excluded, because it reduces their adaptive capacity to deal with the changes that are happening. So for example, if they don't have a bank account, or if they do not manage their bank account on their own, they cannot deal with any impact or shortage of resources or shortage of finance on their own. So these kind of things, even education, it disadvantages women to a larger extent when climate change happens. This is my idea of the disproportionate impact. In India, the problem is the migration. Many of the laborers that work in Delhi, they migrate from the neighboring states, and they have a lot of farmland over there, but they don't work on their farms. They work here as laborers, and they do a lot of activities. They earn money here. Who is working on the farm? Their wives are working on the farm. So that's what that actually makes them more vulnerable to such kind of impacts. If the floods are coming in those states, then they are the ones who are going to first suffer, because they're living alone over there. They are handling the kids, they're handling the farmland, they're handling the house, everything, and their husbands are living here and doing another job. So this kind of thing, even migration impacts, it's actually disadvantages them in such cases. And if they're not educated, then some middleman will come and take away their right. This is basically, in my view, this is financial injustice, and most of the time they're out of the decision making process.
That you are working with groups of local people, of people who are really affected directly by climate change and the impacts coming with it. And I think what works best to get an idea how climate change and gender are really interconnected is to hear about personal stories. And I know you have lots of personal stories to share, so I would like to ask you to please share some stories of people you are working with, and maybe measures that you as a research group or whatever, or the people themselves took to overcome the barriers and the burden they're carrying.
Yes, so I was actually working with an NGO called the Development Alternatives, and that actually gave me an opportunity to meet women directly who are working on the ground, and who are active women who have shown that it's possible to have a change, to change the situation on the ground through their own efforts. So I basically met women from self-help groups. In India, we have SHGs, the self-help groups. So the women, they help themselves, and in that process, they help each other. So I will share with you two examples that I was really impressed with. One of them was in Rajasthan, India, and another is in Madhya Pradesh, India. So, and both of them in areas that are really secluded, they're really, underdeveloped areas. So in one of them, the woman was the head of the village. She was very active, and she basically made possible to, set up a water tank in the village. The village was suffering from extreme water shortage, and nobody was able to help them. So these women, they took the initiative to collect money from the village itself, and to set up a water tank over there, which today provides water to the entire village. It's a small thing for us, but for even if 100 people are living in a village, or 200 people are living in a village, all of them are suffering from water shortage, and a woman comes in front and says that I have a solution, and this is what we can do, and let's do it. Another example from Madhya Pradesh that I want to give is that, again, a self-help group. So these women, they were so active. I was really amazed to see how they used the awareness and the knowledge that was provided by this organization, Development Alternatives, that I was working with. They use that to set up a biogas plant, and
Wow.
through that biogas plant, the energy that was produced from the biogas plant, they set up a small machinery basically to prepare turmeric powder. It was the purest form that they were preparing. It was kind of a small cottage industry kind of a thing. I think these things, putting women in the feet of an entrepreneur, they can do very well.
Yeah.
We don't need to give them money just to support them. We don't have to give them the fish. We have to teach them how to catch the fish. That's the thing. And once you do that, then you don't need to support them. They themselves are going to support others. I was working in the Himalayan region, and I went there and I said that I want to do a focus group discussion. And I did not say that I want to meet only women or men, but 90% were women.
Oh, wow.
90%. I was so shocked. I said, wow, I mean, like 90% women are here. I want to ask you about gender equality. And they said that here we don't have issues of gender equality. Women are basically in many cases, they're head of the families, and they are working at an equal footing with males. And we don't even think that there's an issue of gender equality.
What do you think should be done to break the nexus between gender and climate? Which recommendations would you give the government? Which recommendations would you give policymakers, entrepreneurs, or like whoever, but to break that nexus and to elaborate real gender equality? And
yes. So actually, climate change is something that impacts all sectors. So any policy that is not even tagged like a climate change policy for women, anything good that the government does for the women is definitely going to make them more resilient, and it will increase their adaptive capacity for the for tackling the changes that the climate change is going to affect them with. So, but I would like to also stress on the global processes that are happening that I feel are more top down, like inclusion of women in the meetings, so which I have been stressing, and also in one of my research papers on women and climate change. So the thing is that when you increase the participation of women in the meetings, the on the ground women, they don't know about it. They just don't know about what is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. They don't know. So when we talk about the nexus between gender and climate, this is the first thing. First thing is awareness at the local level. First thing is putting the local women at a stage where they can actually make decisions which affect their life directly. But that doesn't really happen. We need to engage them into the decision making processes, understand the climate change impacts that they are facing from, and then include them into the policy making, instead of that coming from the international level or even the national level, I would say. And if UNFCCC really wants to make a change on the ground, it needs to come up with some suggestions on how the gender perceptions, or the needs of the gender should be included in the national planning, or even in the nationally determined contributions, which should actually not just be mitigation, but it should also talk about adaptation. I'm not only talking here about India, I'm talking about the countries, all the developing countries and developed countries. There should be a way to include gender perceptions in the national determined contributions, so that it becomes a part of the development process. For example, in the developmental planning also, women are usually not included. Women, I should say, even environment is not included in developmental planning. So if there are any governmental projects or any private sector projects that happen at a place where the local community is directly affected, I think the government needs to think that this kind of a project or an activity should not impact the local community, especially women. If it does, then it should be immediately scrapped.
everybody understood now that water is really crucial when it comes to gender and climate change, and that even the smallest steps and even the empowerment of local communities and empowering people and empowering women to be the head of villages and to take part in decision makings is a very, very important and key step. And I think people got aware that the private sector is very crucial as well to empower women and to really make a change when it comes to the nexus of gender and climate change. So Hima, thank you so much again for taking the time and for this very inspirational and informative talk.